In the time before time, the Great Spirit descended from the heavens carrying we, the ones called the Matoran, to this island paradise. We were separate and without purpose, so the Great Spirit blessed us with 3 virtues: unity, duty, and destiny. And today, we're not performing a live reading of the book in my hands called The Tale of the Toa. No, although that would be fun. No, we are going to be talking about some Bionicle mocks, but we're also going to be focusing on that thing we just spoke about, unity. Because today we've got a collaborative spotlight from 6 very talented builders who've built some cool Bionicle mocks, obviously inspired by the Toa Mata, which is fitting because the book I was reading from is also all about the Toa Mata. Yay. But hey, yeah, unity, that's a thing that we do in community, isn't it? And I don't know, maybe we'll talk about duty and destiny in future Bionicle Inspiration Series episodes. We'll find out. But yes, every so often I like to do these episodes where I spotlight a specific collaborative group of builds from builders out there who've made cool stuff. As I've said in past ones, if you've got a collaborative project that you're making with a friend or two, let me know about it, because if you have done something like that, I'd love to cover it on the show, because it's, that's what I like to do here, is to just spotlight what the community is doing, just to keep the spirit of Bionicle alive, you know? Yeah. So we're going to talk about that today. 6 Toa Mata-inspired revamps, mocks, reimaginings, whatever you want to call them, all of which have been built by some really talented builders. So, without further ado, let's begin with the first Toa we're going to be talking about today. It's your boy, Kupaka, and this is built by Classic Bricks, or as it's actually called, Kupaka. I always say Kupaka for whatever reason. I just grew up saying that, and it's a habit now. I apologize, but hey, you know who it is. It's your boy. So this fantastic version of Kupaka, one thing I really like about it is the sword design. So I always actually really enjoyed Kupaka as a toy. Ironically though, when I first bought all of my original Bionicle sets, I started with Gully. Gully was actually the very first Bionicle set that I bought, Gully Mata, and I went slowly and bought all the rest. But I actually never bought Kupaka. It wasn't that I didn't like it. I actually really liked him. I don't know, never got around to getting him, you know? It's just, that sort of thing always happened as a kid, you know? I'm sure it happened to you as well, where you're like, I wanted that toy. I just never ended up buying it. I've since, in more recent times, obtained a Kupaka. But I always remember looking at the sword and thinking it was really cool, and just imagined what it would be like to hold it, use it, build with it, all sorts of stuff. So it's cool to see it rebuilt here in a more sort of system-focused version that I think actually does pay a lot of homage to the original piece itself. I always think it's actually just a really cool design to do that, to take a pre-existing Lego piece and rebuild it in maybe even a larger scale, a smaller scale, but using a whole bunch of different pieces to recreate one piece. Sometimes it can just be a really fun challenge, or just could look cool, you know, or could be better suited for the specific scale or project that you're building. So hey, something to consider. But some stuff that I love about this is I love how when it's sort of expanded and made larger, this specific sword piece, the studs in the middle that sort of link the two sides together into one, those studs kind of almost look like some sort of, I don't know, energy that's kind of pulsing between the swords there, almost like it's got some sort of I don't know, lightning powers coursing through it. I know Kupaka is a Toa of ice, but I don't know, I think you could very easily recreate this weapon on your own kind of Toa creation. And maybe you want to have, some sort of elemental powers flowing through it. I mean, you could so easily replace those stud pieces with some translucent colored stud pieces or any other colored stud piece. And it could very effectively look like some type of energy or elemental power is coursing through it. I think that's just a fun little detail here. So I like that a lot. I also like the very tip of this sword, because it transitions from plates into what was kind of an older piece that doesn't really exist anymore. Typically these days we have a lot of sort of like clip pieces, or some of the kind of older ratchet joint pieces, which came on a lot of plates and other sort of system sets and things. But these specific kind of clip, kind of joining pieces, for lack of a better term, in the past, they were a very different design. If you look a little bit more closely towards this weapon, you can see it. You know what? I'll get a picture of it. So here you go. So this is this sort of older kind of ratchet hinge piece, which has kind of been replaced nowadays with more of a kind of clip design. But this is the older hinge piece, which has been used here on the design, which, if you're playing at home, it's called a hinge plate 1x2 with 3 fingers. And there is, of course, the counterpart to that piece, which I believe just has the 2 fingers so that it locks in place with that. They're a pretty cool piece. They're a pretty old piece. They're not really in any modern sets. just playing it by ear. I think they were sort of discontinued by like the 90s. Let me check. Like 2000, but so like very, very late 90s, they stopped really making these pieces. So you may not have any in your collection, unfortunately, but there's still a pretty cool piece. And there's some surprising connections you can use with these. Like, for example, like we see on the sword design here, some of those ski pieces that come on a variety of different sets. There are sort of alternatives of that ski piece that has room for you to clip in some of those finger clips. We'll call them finger clips. So hey, it's interesting that he's using some older pieces here to kind of form the very edge or tip of this Kupaka sword here, and I really like it. I specifically like too that he's using a lot of like older pieces, not really a lot of, just kind of two, but yeah, older pieces in general, because hey, you know, your collection at home might just consist of a lot of newer sets. That's always a possibility. But maybe you've inherited a bulk collection that you've bought online, or maybe you have some old Lego from your parents or an old friend or something like that. Don't be afraid of some of those older pieces because, you know, hey, you can create some really cool stuff with them that you just can't create nowadays with certain other pieces or certain other connections that may not work, or some surprising connections that you might discover. So play around with some of those older, more outdated pieces because, well, they're worth playing with, you know? You can get some cool stuff with them. I also like to the kind of finger design that Kupaka has here, Look, man, it's hard to break that habit, but I'm trying. He's using some of they're very cool little clip pieces here. All right, I'll get another description of it up on Bricklink. Let me pause, find it, and we'll come back. So these clip pieces are being used for the fingers here. The bar 1L with clip mechanical claw. That's the one. And then he's attached the little itty bitty tiny little pin pieces onto them there, just to kind of buff out the fingers a little bit more. And I think it actually looks really, really slick and really, really cool. I think it's a really clever way of doing a little bit more of a sort of smaller scale finger design, but one that really works quite well on this mock as a whole. And kind of going off of that in general, taking a look at all of the grey areas on this mock here, they're very kind of greeble heavy. There's a lot of sort of little tiny itty bitty details in there in the design as a whole. And I really like that because you take a look at some of the older Bionicle sets, they've leaned a lot more heavily into a more sort of greebled, detailed, mechanical looking texture. So really kind of playing that up here on this revamp of Kupaka, I really, really like that. I think it's quite fitting for the aesthetic of the time, you know, and yeah, I think it also too, it's just interesting to reflect back on old Bionicle and notice the difference in textures when you compare it to the final wave of G2, or even the final wave of Bionicle G1 with stars, you know. There were pretty noticeable differences with the sort of overall aesthetics of those sets. So just interesting to kind of note that, and then if you are revamping something, what sort of style do you want to emulate? Do you want to be true to the original, or do you want to have a bit of a departure from the original? Either way, though, I like that this is paying homage to the original here. I think it works quite well, and is very fitting. So that was Kupaka. Let us now move on to the next mock, which is Onowa, and this one was designed by NS Brick Designs. So immediately, one thing that grabbed me about this Onowa revamp here, and actually Kupaka had one as well, the use of the gear sort of on the lower waist of this mock here. I really like how that looks. Again, it's like I said before, a lot of G1 really played onto this very kind of detail-heavy, greeble-heavy aesthetics to just the general look of the toys. And I remember that really captivating me when the Toamata originally came out. I always thought it just looked really nice, looked really cool, and it got me sort of sucked into the world of Bionicle. So it's really great to see that continue to be played with here on Onowa. And I think just that slight addition of the gear there works really well, because, I don't know, I can almost hear how that would sound, you know, sort of as he moves his waist to look behind him or something. I can kind of hear how that gear would move, and it just sort of makes me it just kind of brings this mock to life a little bit more, because you kind of see how the functionality of it would work if it was a living, breathing creature. Do Bionicles breathe? Is the question of the day. I don't know. I'm sure there's something in some book, like the book I was reading at the start of the episode that says, like, you know, Kupaka sighed, and you'll be like, oh, there you go. There you go, he breathes. Regardless, though, I just like that. That may not serve any purpose, but it looks like it serves a purpose. And I think that just makes it really kind of shine and really stand out, because It's a nice little attention to detail that I think actually goes a long way. It's very subtle, but I think it does a lot, says a lot, even if it doesn't actually have a physical purpose. That being said, if it does have a physical purpose and it acts as waist articulation, even better. 10 points. Why not? Great idea. I like it a lot. Something else I like a lot too is the finger design on Onowa here. So before we saw those clip bar pieces that I showed you before. They were used on Kupaka, but he then had those little tiny pins over the top of them. Here instead, he has opted to put even more of those clip bar pieces on them, and it instead creates this almost, more clawed aesthetic, which, obviously Onowa had that kind of claw aesthetic because that was his sort of main weapon, which made sense because he was a bit of a, miner and dug around in the stone and stuff. But I think that's just a really great way of recreating that design there. It's a little bit more smaller in scale, but I don't know, I think it works quite well. Especially too, when you think about it, did Onowa just always have these super massive claws? Like, was it really awkward for him to kind of pick stuff up? Here it's a little bit more kind of subtle, more, like he could still use his hands for everyday tasks, but he could also still very effectively dig with them at the same time. So I actually think it's a more kind of realistic take on how that might work, which I quite like. But also, just a really cool design and a great way of emulating that clawed Onowa piece as well. Another very tiny, subtle detail that I really like about Onowa here is the inclusion of this little droid arm piece kind of on the joint between what's where the elbow is, but kind of the front of the elbow where the lower arm meets the upper arm there. He's just included one of those sort of newer fandangled droid arm pieces, and that's just been kind of slotted into the two boat studs that link the upper and lower arm together. So it's a bit more of you could argue it's an illegal connection because it's not actually officially connected there. It's just sort of sandwiched between the two pieces. But it looks really cool. It kind of looks like just some sort of additional robotic piston that links the two limb parts together there. It just kind of looks nice, Again, a little tiny, weeny, itty bitty bitty subtle detail. But it goes a long way, and I think it really continues that mechanical aesthetic that is very, akin to Bionicle as a whole. So I really like that. Little subtle things always go a long way. It's cool to see. So that was Onowa. Let us now move over to Gully, and Gully was built by Miscellanea Builds. So we just spoke about the kind of claw weapons on Onowa, and I want to now speak about the sort of hook weapons that Gully has here. So something I like about them here is the fact that, the original set for Gully, her claw little hook things, were just Mutta Blue, just straight up. But here they're a nice blend of Mutta Blue, and also a little bit of light bluish grey thrown in there as well. And I like that, because it kind of makes sense. If you had these sort of hooks that you could use as weapons, or just sort of an additional sort of tool that can help you kind of climb or swim or whatever, it makes sense that they would have some sort of like metal that you could see with it. And yeah, again, it's just a more sort of realistic take on how that weapon would probably actually look if it were more of a realistic weapon that you would hold and use. So I like that. It's fitting. It also very effectively, works with the rest of the color scheme of this mock. And I have said in past episodes, I don't always think that a weapon needs to fit the color scheme of a mock because, it kind of makes sense. If you're a knight walking into battle, you're not going to be like, well, man, my sword is red. That totally clashes with my armor. I can't fight. I got to go back to base and change up my sword. Otherwise, I'm not going to accessorize, Which, depends, of course, Sometimes a lot of weapons do match the color scheme of a character just for, aesthetic reasons or because it looks nice. But also I think it makes total sense that they don't have to, It's completely up to the person who's building it and designing it. But hey, I like that they match the color scheme of the rest of her here as well. I think it's just a fun way to do it. And also, too, just completely recreating that piece and system there, it works well. It's just an effective looking design. Additionally, too, we can see some of the dot pieces being used. Some of those quarter tile pieces are used on the legs, the arms, a few other different places there. Always love my dot pieces. I think they're beautiful for adding in little itty-bitty bits of detail into your designs there. And I think they work especially well here on Gully because, not only are they used there in conjunction with a whole bunch of other tiles, but just the texture of those dot pieces and those tiles as well. I know, they have this more sort of sleek and smooth look to them, which I think fits with Gully's element of water, because water is a little bit more sleek and smooth and flowing, like a good wave or something. So I think that's just paying attention to the textures and aesthetics of specific pieces is also a really great way of representing the element that the Toa or character that you're making could have control over. So again, another little subtle thing, but I think it goes a long way. I really like that. Additionally too, I believe this is a digital render of Gully here. I can't quite fully tell. Sometimes the kids these days, they do a good job with their computers here. They make it look quite realistic, or they do a good job of their physical mocks and make it almost look a little digital. Sometimes it's hard to tell. But regardless, those specific dot pieces don't come in the sort of medium blue that Gully originally had as a part of her color scheme. They more come in, I believe the color is called Azure, I think. There's a lot of different shades of Lego blue, actually, so I often get those mixed up, but I believe it's called Azure. Don't quote me on that. It might be like a medium Azure or something, I don't know. But regardless, they, by the looks of it, have changed up the color scheme here to be, instead of that medium blue, be more of an Azure. And again, those colors are pretty close to one another, but I kind of like that too, you know? If you are revamping something, do you want to slightly change the color scheme and include a more updated, new, fancy schmancy color? Because I actually get quite excited when I get to use a brand new Lego color in a mock, because playing with color is fun, and sometimes it can just inspire you a lot more. I know that there's a bunch of builders out there who get very heavily inspired by a nice color scheme. That might be something to inspire you as well. But what I meant by, is this a digital mock or not? Sometimes with digital mocks you can change the colors of specific pieces, so maybe that is in fact medium blue, but I don't believe those dot pieces exist in medium blue, so could be one of those, tweaks there. Or could be totally realistic, I honestly don't know. Regardless though, looks cool, and I love the concept of changing the colors anyway. A fun thing to be playing with. Okay, so we're now going to move on to Leewar, one of my favorites of the Taumata, and this is by Thank the Lego Maker. Great name. So Leewar, always loved Leewar, and I think this is a great rendition of Leewar. I specifically love the axe design he's done here, obviously recreating Leewar's original axe design, but doing it just more exclusively using system pieces, and I think it looks fantastic. It is using a bit of a sort of illegal technique here. You can see the exact same clip pieces we keep talking about. Those are the pieces of the day, it would seem, and they're being attached into some other different kind of clip pieces as well, but they're not actually being officially attached. Often the clip-on-clip action that we're seeing there is considered an illegal technique, so, you know, it depends on your opinion. It always comes back to this conversation with illegal techniques where people are like, well, should I not do it? And it's like, well, do you want to do it? It's completely up to you, you know? There's some people who hate them, some people who love them. Where do you sit? What side do you choose? It's up to you, and honestly, both are fine. But hey, regardless, I think it looks like a fantastic design anyway. So hey, a cool little way of designing an axe design there. Using a whole bunch of clips and some other curved slopes and different things like that, it works well. Additionally, something I love a lot about this Leewar revamp specifically is how he has recreated the torso and the limbs and everything. It's very, very system heavy. Of course, the others were system heavy as well, but you can really, really see the inspiration of redesigning the original pieces here, specifically on the torso. That really, really heavily looks like that original Mutta torso piece there, but obviously reimagined just using system pieces. But yeah, really, really good job of reimagining that there. It looks awesome. And I think there's just such a beautiful art of doing that, of recreating specific pieces using a lot of other pieces. It often looks really cool to me. I also like too that this Leewar revamp here is a little bit different to the Kupaka revamp we saw before, which is a little bit more greeble heavy. This one's actually a lot more smooth in its design, which ironically, you know, I think actually works really well. You know, like I said, yes, the original pieces had more sort of detailed textures to them, but seeing Leewar all smoothed up like this, I actually think it works pretty well and looks pretty good, and there's nothing wrong with that. So cool to see the two being done in very different textured styles, but honestly it works super, super well. And that's one of the beautiful things about a collab, is you can see the way that multiple different builders with different backgrounds, different ways of building, different styles, how they approach something very similar. And, you know, when you start to compare all the different things that builders have done, it could just be a really fun thing to look through them and just be like, oh wow, hey, look how they did that. It's different to the other one. That's cool. And yeah, from there you can also look at it and say, well, if I was a part of this collab, how would I build this? What sort of differences would my unique style of building contribute to this? Or, you know, how would I reimagine this in my own unique way? You know, always fun questions to ask. And, you know, I'd always used to say that about like looking at a cool piece of art or watching a good movie or something, you know, when you finish it and you're like, man, that's made me want to make something cool, you know? I always think that's a sign of seeing some good art or seeing a good mock, is just being like, man, that's inspired me. I want to do my own cool stuff with it. So, hey, hopefully seeing all these different build styles in this collab here has inspired you to continue to refine your own build style or make something in your own unique style, because that's always fun. Final little thing I want to say about Leewar here, I love the hand design, really great way of recreating that specific mutter hand piece. And what I always saw as guns on Leewar's fingers, I don't know about you, but I always thought that he had little, like, I don't know, laser things coming out of his, like, fingers, but they probably were just his actual, fingers. But I always saw that as a kid, so I like that they're being represented here, once again, with those bar clip piece little thing. What are they called again? I've already forgotten the name, because Lego piece names are always complicated and hard to say. They are called Bar 1L with clip mechanical claw. The mechanical claw pieces. So I like that that's those guns are being represented there. Or fingers, whatever. But I also like that Lee was kind of just waving here in this image. I think it just, it adds a lot of character, It's always important to think about how you want to pose your Bionicle characters when you're photographing them, because, it helps bring them to life, helps really accentuate a lot of character, which is always good. We now move on to Pohatu, which is made by E-Mazing Bricks. And I love Pohatu, man. Pohatu's always been a fun character for me, especially because I loved how the original toy flipped the torso design there so that his play feature was to kick instead of to kind of move his arms and stuff. I always thought that was cool. And I like that is kind of also being represented here, having the kind of lower waist area be a bit larger, but it also kind of looks a little bit like the torso has actually been flipped, even though it is actually a different design to the all the other different torsos we've seen across all these different Toamata. But just the fact that it does look a little bit more heavier at the bottom and slimmer up top, which has been obviously the opposite for all the other characters we've seen in this collab. It's a fun little throwback to the original way that this set was built, and I really, really like that. It's just a fun little detail that he didn't have to do, but I like that he included it as a bit of a throwback. Another little thing I like about this, which is a little bit more unique, is a lot of these sort of grey highlights on here, specifically on the knees, the arms, a bit on the waist as well. I almost kind of see them as like knee pads or other sort of, I don't know, like when you look at like a professional athlete or something, they'll often wear like that, knee pads or other sort of, not really like protective armor or something, but just sort of stuff that helps them to move better or helps to perform the tasks that they might be doing a little bit better, that sort of thing. I kind of see it as some sort of, either like protective armor or just sort of little additional enhancements just to help him with what he's doing. Whether they're, up to code, whether he's allowed to include those in the various sporting competitions that he's entering, I don't know. But, hey, I like them. I think they're fun. I think it's just a very subtle little detail that I think actually works quite well and is very fitting, Specifically, too, the idea of knee pads, like it kind of makes sense that if his legs are his sort of primary weapon, that he'd want to have a little bit of protection in specific areas there just so that he doesn't put strain on his body or just so that he doesn't damage, important joints or things. I think it just kind of makes sense. So I like that little inclusion and little detail there. But something else I like about this collab as well is just the general kind of consistency across all the different designs, There have been some great ways of all the different builders here putting their own unique personal touches on the actual mocks. But we do see a lot of consistency, like specifically on Pohatu's hands here. We saw a very similar design on Leewar, and, we'll be seeing it again on Tahu in the next one here. But that, and even just kind of how, like, the feet are made. All the different feet designs have been fairly different, but they still are very reminiscent of the original Mutta foot piece. So there's little sort of subtle things that are going on that does tie it together, but there's enough differences too that each mock is really unique in its own way. So I like seeing that in this collab, the differences but also the similarities, and there's a lot of both, which is just nice, I like it a lot. So hey, that's Pohatu, some really nice stuff going on here. Let's move on to the final one in this episode, and it's our boy Tahu. Again, like I said before, we see that same hand design that we saw on Leewar and Pohatu. So great to see that being used there. Nice consistency between everything. And speaking of consistency, he has a fairly similar foot design to that of Leewar, and also kind of to some degree that of Kupaka. But again, little subtle changes and subtle nods. But it's just nice to notice that it is similar to some of those other designs there. That's always a pleasant sight. Nice to see a bit of consistency. Additionally, too, speaking of consistency, I love what the guys here have done with this specific collab of editing the backgrounds here on all these mocks. It's just a nice way to know that all these builders have built something in the same vein, but also just, it just looks nice, If you've got the skills to use Photoshop or any other sort of editing software, by all means take advantage of that and edit out the background, make it look nice and pretty like this, because hey, it goes a long way, And I know a lot of kids these days tend to learn Photoshop in school, which I never did. But hey, I had to learn it in university, so, you can always pick it up later as well if you didn't learn it in school. But hey, if you do learn it in school, you can always put those that good learning to practice in your hobby as well with Lego. So hey, something to consider. One thing I do like about this Tahu revamp here is the way that he's designed the flame sword here, specifically using at the very base of the kind of hilt of this sword, using a 1x3 slope where it kind of slopes on both sides there and kind of meets in the middle. That piece is in red, and then from there he's just attached all these different flame pieces on it. It kind of very effectively recreates how those sort of flame sword pieces look. I think it's well done. It also buffs it out a little bit more, and hey, it's cool. And also what is cool is the arm that's holding that flame sword up as well. The way he's used those different cheese slope pieces there to kind of create this sort of grooved effect. It's very similar to how the actual original piece looks, because it did have a very sort of similar effect or sort of texture to it. So, hey, again, pretty cool. Always nice to see how things are recreated and redesigned and reimagined. It's been it's been a nice journey to look at all these mocks and see all the different things they've done. And hey, it's always cool to see a wonderful little collab here in the community. So like I said, if you've got a collab of your own, do let me know. The builders here reached out to me. They actually reached out to me over Instagram initially, and then they submitted these mocks through the submission email. So you can do the same. If you want to reach out to me just to let me know you have a collab, you're free to do so on any forms of my social media. But if you want to specifically submit your mocks to appear on any episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, whether it's a collab that you want to spotlight that you're a part of, or maybe you're not a part of and you just know about it, or you've got a mock that you want to just see on any regular episode of the show, the best place, or the only place, to submit them is the submission email that you're currently seeing on your screen. Send me images, information, whatever you want to put in the email. Send it my way, I'll add it to the list, and it'll appear on the show. And just so I clarify, you have to submit it through that submission email. I will not accept submissions if they're through anything else. That's just so all the submissions are in one place, and I don't have to go tracking into 17 different places to find the submission that this guy sent me or that guy sent me, But feel free to reach out to me to have a chat over social media to talk about this sort of thing, because I'll happily respond and happily let you know. But you got to submit your stuff through that email. Additionally, too, in the description are links to all of the builders you saw today. Some of them are directly linked to their posts of these individual mocks, and some of them are just linked to the actual builders' pages. But there is also a link as well, and sorry, I should have mentioned this sooner. All of these builders are a part of a sort of larger group called the Salty Builders. So there's a link to their larger Instagram there as well. So you can check out the Salty Builders over there. They built a lot of other cool stuff as well, so be sure to check that out. Additionally as well, there's links to some of my social media as well. University's done. I've sort of kind of not really graduated. I have graduated, but I haven't had the ceremony yet, but I'm done with classes and blah, blah, blah. So, that's pretty exciting. But it means that I can finally post all those projects that were a part of university assessments on the social medias. So get ready for some cool stuff, because I made some cool things, and it's coming your way soon. So get ready. It'll be fun. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.